care. This planet's empty, I see no signs of life. Please don't tell me that the human race did not survive. There are no people in the future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. It is Monday, February 13th, 2023. As my daughter reminded me this morning when she told me I better put Pringles in her lunch, it is Galentine's Day, according to my daughter. Happy Galentine's Day for all who are celebrating. And welcome to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Live. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyards and from across the country. You can also join us at the end of the week for our Friday Politics Roundup, where we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can check out all our podcasts by, heading on over to Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us everywhere. We're there. And while you're there, leave us a review. Give us that 5-star rating that helps other people find the show. You can help support the show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress today. And you can help out the show right now, especially if you're already jumping on our YouTube channel. If you're there, smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. Welcome to all our live viewers tonight. Any questions you have, thoughts you may have, you throw them in tonight's chat. For more PA Progressive talk, tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you get your streams, he's there. And you got to make sure you subscribe to his podcast as well. Head on over to thericksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And you got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know their bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. And subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you haven't heard, The Signal is a brand new podcast by the Bucks County Beacon. The Signal is hosted by the Beacon's editor-in-chief, Cyril Michaleko, and produced by yours truly. How about that? Twice a month, The Signal will shine a light on the right-wing extremist currents streaming through Bucks County and beyond. Cyril invites guests who can provide insight, analysis, and organization solutions so that we can steer the community toward calmer, saner, progressive roots. Right now, you can check out the Signal at buckscountybeacon.podbean.com. That is coming to every streaming platform that you could possibly imagine in the coming days, as soon as all those little technical not gremlins, like you just got to go through and submit your podcast after you have one up and blah, 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 blah. So it takes a couple weeks to get that going. But do check it out right now, the buckscountybeacon.podbean.com. Check them out on their socials, and they'll post all that info. And attention all you gamers out there, the Game Inn, that's with 2 N's. The Game Inn is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything for retro N64s to the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops. And kids get A's. When kids get A's, when kids get A's, they get discounts. That just rocks. Come on, you got to go check them out. Head over to their Facebook page, follow them on Twitter at The Game In, that's with 2 N's. Got a question about a game, looking for something hard to get, shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. Special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongAdayman, that's with 2 N's, at SongAdayman on Twitter. And yes, it is school board election season, which means we cannot let Paul Martino and his oligarch friends buy our schools and push extremist politics in our community. Raging Chicken has teamed up with Levelfield to launch a truly community-rooted PAC to invest in organizing, supporting local and statewide progressive candidates, and unmasking the toxic organizations injecting our communities with right-wing extremism. We're putting small dollar donations to work to beat back the power of big money. You can get more information and drop your donation at ragingchicken.levelfield.net. Well, I'll tell you, I'm very, very excited tonight because I welcome Alyssa Bowen back to the show tonight, which means, yes, you know it, it's Dark Money Night here at Raging Chicken, you bet. Alyssa is a senior researcher and managing editor for the progressive watchdog group True North Research. And tonight we'll be talking about her recent article in TruthOut called "The Right Has Expanded Its Dark Money Strategy for Dominating School Boards." Yes, we thought we'd get a break from the extremism in our school board elections. We were very wrong. They also have a brand new article that just dropped called written with Lisa Graves. Tax docs link right-wing parents groups to Leonard Leo's dark money network, you bet. Alyssa received her PhD in history from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in 2021 with an interest in fascism and anti-fascism, solidarity and social movements, immigration, exile, and transnational history. She has bylines in The Nation and in TruthOut, where she is a regular contributor. More of her public writing can be found on Truth North Research's website and on Substack. You can follow Alyssa on Twitter at Alyssa Ann Bowen. That's at Alyssa Ann Bowen on Twitter. We've got links to all her articles and how to find out more about the great work that's happening over at True North Research. Check out the links in our bio or head on to truenorthresearch.org for all the info. Alyssa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That's
Oh,
always
you got. I guess I should welcome back to the show. You're like kind of like my go-to person here on Dark Money.
I just noticed today, actually, in a month it'll be like a year since the first time I was on.
I was just seeing that. I was just looking back at the previous one. I'm like, oh man, God, look at this. We're gonna have to have some kind of anniversary or something.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty.
Exactly. Well, before we dive into the specifics of your article, which are so critical and have become increasingly more important as as I said in the intro there, that the craziness that's happening in our school boards is not going away. But can you let folks, especially for folks that are maybe new to the show, a little bit about True North Research and the kind of work that you all do over there?
Yeah, absolutely. So True North Research, we're a progressive watchdog group, and we track dark money and special interests in politics. And we're headed by Lisa Graves, who has been a senior advisor in all three branches of the government. She's also the chair of the board at CMD, and she was co-founder of Documented, which is another sort of investigative watchdog group. And basically what we try to do is uncover the funding and influence of these ultra wealthy and corporate donors that are undermining our democracy. And that covers topics, from the Supreme Court, like we'll probably talk about today, also state courts, USPS, even to the local school boards.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, it's funny. It's like, this is the kind of research that becomes the necessary kind of work or the necessary information that we need on the ground, especially as, nobody locally has the resources to uncover all these networks. I mean, and so thank God for the work that you're doing. And we've talked about this, on this show how many times now about our local school districts here in Bucks County have really gone off the rails. They've been infiltrated by everything from QAnon to, Moms for Liberty to the Proud Boys have all been showing up. And now, the focus is, well known on Central Bucks School District, where, that's been written up in the New Yorker, that's appeared on kind of NPR, and that's, that's gotten a lot of press, but also my school district in Penridge. And now we find out that just this week we have, this is expanding over into, well, it's been around for a bit over at Berks County to Kutztown area school district, which are just censoring a book on climate change. We're finding it showing up in Souderton and some of these other districts too as well. So it just seems so essential that you're doing this work.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And, we try, we're a very small group, but we try as best as we can to elevate the voices of people on the ground who live in these communities that are being attacked too, because they're the real heroes doing the necessary work and facing the risks. Honestly, you hear about local parents who are actually combating these right-wing parents that are often like either they are local but they're always like almost always backed by like far right dark money groups. And these parents are these parents fighting back, they're doing the hard work and they're facing, they get doxxed, they get attacked, they get like verbally abused by these groups. So Yeah, I just want to shout out to them and thank you, Kevin. I know you're one of them.
Yeah, 100%. There's so many of these the folks that have been on the ground are really, it's impressive, the organizing work that's going on. It's and it can be a bit daunting when you realize that, the right wing has been organized, as you're talking about in some of these pieces, for decades. I mean, this has been a project that has been ongoing for a long time. And they've got, when you got one person at the top who can just kind of like, send out, millions and billions of dollars behind a particular project, that's a very efficient model to undermine democracy.
Yeah.
So, I feel like we've been telling a story of sorts, like, since you said, since you first came on about a year ago, as we see this, information begin to, as you all begin to unpack this information more, as you look into these groups more, and more of the story seems to appear each time you publish some of this research. So the piece that you started with in December was, the right has expanded its dark money strategy for dominating school boards. And let's talk a little bit about that expanding thing, because it seems like this is that latest installment, that next chapter of where we're seeing these groups like Moms for Liberty, like Parents Defending Education, right? Like all these kind of, good sounding name groups that are infiltrating our stuff. So take us into the article a little bit about what your findings were and what you were trying to do there.
Yeah, absolutely. So this article is following up on a TruthOut piece I wrote maybe in September, I think, that you had me on for as well.
Yeah.
But this one was actually sort of trying to create a counter narrative, because all these dark money groups had made the case to the media, and the right-wing media, and the right-wing media flew with it, of course, that even though it was a disappointing midterms generally, there wasn't a red wave, there was a quote-unquote red undercurrent, and that was in the school boards. And so they created this narrative that like, attacking the schools is actually the way to go, and it should be a model moving forward in 2024, et cetera. But in reality, I think that they kind of flopped, or at least were like way more disappointing than they portrayed themselves as. And that doesn't mean, and we can talk about this later, that they aren't building towards something more aggressive. But, for example, Moms for Liberty only won about half of the school board races that they backed candidates in, like that. And we just found out from their 2021 990 that year, they had $370,000 in income that their opponents didn't have, to
Right.
like influence these races. I mean, not all of them went to school board races, but a lot did. So, and then, 1776 Project PAC, which is a PAC that's just dedicated to influencing races, mostly through outside spending, like sending mailers and those kinds of things and doing TV ads. They took in more than 3 million since 2021. And they only won about 60% of the races in the November election. So that's not really that impressive given the amount of resources that they have to spend. And FreedomWorks is like it's like
Old school.
Yeah, exactly. It's an old school like Coke network group. And they bragged for some reason that they won, that 34 of their aligned candidates won in that election. But we know, and 86 in 2022, but we've seen them like bragging about hundreds of candidates that they've supported. So really not that impressive. Is sort of what I wanted to say, is like, okay, is it even really helping the right like they say it is? Maybe not. It's really just, hurting our kids. But obviously that's working towards a larger goal, right? And they are being, well, first of all, they're, like I said, hurting our kids. They're like implementing book bans. They're these new right-wing school boards, because they were successful in flipping some school boards, right? And especially in Florida, Moms for Liberty was really successful. And in South Carolina, we saw in Charleston, which is a liberal district, they flipped the school board there. And then the first thing that the new school board did was, get rid of the first Black superintendent, I think, in the history of that school.
But we're not racist.
Yeah, that's like the first thing. And, in Florida, we saw the right-wing sheriff, Wayne Ivey, who was working with the Moms for Liberty affiliated school board to implement a new discipline policy, and he used some very graphic language that you can read in the TruthOut article about old school, like using corporal punishment on children.
Yeah, let me read that section so people understand how far off this is. And I know this is like warning, right? Content warning right here, but this is like what the sheriff had said. So it says, they got this guy on there and he wants to implement these new, like, as you say, horrific discipline policies. The speech announcing the new policy, Sheriff Wayne Ivey said that it would be disruptive students' worst nightmare, unquote, and reminiscent of the, quote, old days where students feared having the, quote, cheeks of their asses torn off. Right.
And this is something he favors.
This was his campaign, right? It's like, this is what's going to happen. And vote for me. This is what I want to, implement here.
Yeah.
Right.
So totally unhinged and deranged, in my opinion. I mean, not something we want in our schools. And then obviously, attacking curricula, like you said, attacking like anything related to climate change, these kinds of things. So that part's terrifying. And also they're building infrastructure, which I tried to point out in my piece too. I mean, Moms for Liberty has some local PACs that, alongside there are local right-wing actors. Like you have Paul Martino, who are ultra wealthy, invested in turning the schools to the right. But yeah, these groups also have their own, local PACs that they've started. Moms for Liberty has 3 national PACs that they haven't used yet that are just sitting there waiting. And then 1776 Project is a national PAC that we've seen we've seen it spend, or at least have $3 million to spend on these races, which is a terrifying amount if you know how little is spent on school board races generally per candidate. And part of what's this is just, I only know this because I'm a researcher and trying so hard every day to discover who's funding local elections. It is so difficult to track spending from federal PACs to local elections because there's this whole, the federal PACs don't have to disclose federally what they spend on local races. In the states, they only have to say what they're spending statewide elections. So really, if there's any disclosure at all ever at the local level, which oftentimes there's not, it's not available until much later, or it's or you have to ask for it. In some cases, you even have to do a Freedom of Information request to request it. It's not easy even for me who has a paid job doing this digging. So that part is terrifying too, because federal PACs are supposed to not be dark money. They're supposed to legally have to disclose who their funders are, but that doesn't matter if we don't know how they're spending it.
Yeah, and you say, we should say here too as well, the 1776 PAC too as well, what I thought was fascinating, right? Because this is where you have Richard Uihlein, right, is the primary, as you say in here, the primary funder. And so for everyone who's listening out there, Richard Uihlein, anytime you're buying office supplies or mailing envelopes, or if it says Uihlein, you get that catalog that says Uihlein, your money is going to fund this stuff, right? Your place of work is going to fund this stuff. Right, this guy is bad news, and he's that one that's behind. You say he's the primary. Let's see, here as you put it here, the right wing. So 1776 Project PAC is the right wing political action committee that has collected more than $3 million in contributions since it was first registered in 2021, brand new, right, including $900,000 from the Restoration PAC, whose primary funder is GOP mega donor Richard Uihlein. Seems to have slightly more success than 2021. So you see, I mean, there's multiple angles where this big money is coming in. I got a question for. Oh, sorry. Go ahead first, and I got a question.
Just a quick side note. Yeah, if you want to know more about Richard Uihlein, we just did a huge thread on at It's True North, or at True North. So it's True North Research's Twitter account at It's True North, on Richard Uihlein and how he's now spending to influence the Wisconsin Supreme Court election, which will come to bear on abortion rights and other things. So yeah, if you're interested in Uihlein and the Restoration PAC, you can look there for more info.
Yeah, this is a good question that came from Ross. He was just asking, does 1776 PAC have anything to do with the Hillsdale College, or is this completely, because they have that 1776 curriculum that they released, or is this
Yeah.
completely kind of disconnected? At least, I mean, I'm sure that they all go to the same, like, cocktail parties, but
Yeah. Honestly, if we looked, I'm sure we could find a connection. 1776, the right takes that and they use that. Ben Carson also has a dark money group called 1776 Unites or something. Or no, that's another one actually. So there's several 1776 inspired groups, packs, that kind of thing. But as far as I know, I haven't seen a direct connection between Hillsdale and 1776 pack.
Yeah, good. No, thanks. And I think that one of the things that you kind of lay out here. Well, let's go back a little bit. When you go back to say they didn't have much success, I think that is so important as the kind of the key point here in terms of their ultimate electoral impact was not as kind of big as they wanted it to be. And yet we see money flooding in this direction, right? Despite that fact. So we can't, say, like, hang our hats of hope on that, right, and say that this is automatically going to solve it. But that gives us a sense of what they're actually do. And what I wonder is looking at the, you did this in that last piece in True North when you were on last time too, looking at what happens in Florida, right? About when Florida, you had basically like, the perfect storm. You had inside political connections directly to the governor's office. You had a Republican Party infrastructure that was connected to this funding device, and you had Moms for Liberty all in this thing. So it was almost like Moms for Liberty was out there doing the things the party couldn't do. Yep. Right. And having support from political actors within the state. Do you think that is kind of, that's the direction that they're thinking going forward, is wanting that kind of alliance in the state level?
I totally exactly think that.
Okay.
I think, Florida's a model, and a lot of right-wing folks have been saying like "Make America Florida," So I think, but I think that's certainly true for looking at Florida as a model for how to use schools as a way to like manufacture outrage and like create more support for the right statewide. And they work together. So as I mentioned last time in Florida, for the primaries in August and then the November elections, because there were school board races for both elections, dozens of state GOP aligned PACs were donating to school right-wing school board candidates, alongside Moms for Liberty also has its own PAC that was almost entirely funded by Julie Fancelli, the Public's heir, who also helped fund the January 6th rally that led to the insurrection. So yeah, I mean, there's ties to the establishment GOP, whatever that means, they're far right as well, yeah. But also like the insurrection itself, so or the funders of the rally that led to the insurrection. So I would say also like Moms for Liberty is, they have their Parents Pledge thing that they send around to all these local and statewide politicians to sign. And I think that's part of an effort to build relationships with state and local GOP leaders. And I think, we've already seen a lot of GOP candidates donate to PACs affiliated with Moms for Liberty, and that happened in Pennsylvania too. What was the name of the guy who lost in the GOP primary? He was donating.
Mastriano? Oh, no, the GOP primary.
Primary, yeah. I can't remember his name. But he was running against Mastriano, and I don't know if he was more, like, I don't know where he fell politically. I don't know if he was further right than Mastriano, but he was not a fun guy. And his PAC donated to, like, Moms for Liberty endorsed PAC, I think in Cumberland County. So yeah, they've been working on this strategy for a while, but I definitely think that this is the building those relationships is mutually beneficial to both Moms for Liberty and like dark money infrastructure as a whole, because, if their endorsed candidates win, it looks good for them. They get more donations. But it's also really good. It was really good for Ron DeSantis. So I think, folks will be looking there. GOP folks will be looking there, in 2024.
Yeah, it seems to me that, yeah, I mean, again, we've talked about this kind of thing before, is because this kind of very stark political calculation and power building and infrastructure building is also, it seems, always coupled with just grift, right? I mean, just kind of how do you extract money, right, from this, like this base, and direct it toward whether it's funding a particular political candidate, whether it's just getting yourself paid, right? And you know, so I'm looking, you know, it's because it's interesting because on the one hand, you've got like Moms for Liberty in Florida. They were out there really stoking up, you know, the narrative that DeSantis was then making use of in his campaign and continues to do. I mean, the guy's running roughshod over everything, right? I mean, when it comes to education. So it seems like this mutually beneficial kind of thing. And as long as he's gonna toe that line, you're gonna have you know, your shock troops that are gonna also raise money for you and that are also gonna basically, you know, do the voter turnout for you when it comes election time. So it seems like this kind of informal like machines that are being built, and there always seems to, they're centered around billionaires. There's lots of grift, and they're politically extreme.
Absolutely, all of those things.
That's glorious. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. This is
And
nuts.
the grift thing is so true. I mean, I know I've seen 1776 Project has gotten flack on Twitter from like other right-wing dark money people for being a grift because they, you know, spend a ton on like travel and accommodations and like consulting groups, which you never know. You know, some of that can be legit and like legit in its sketchiness in terms of like their funding ads on issues, they say, like issue ads, which it doesn't help a certain candidate, but you know, says parental rights, which we just know means right-wing rights. And then they don't have to disclose it as outside spending, I believe. So that, you know, they could do things like that, but also consulting can just be like paying your friends, sort of, or, you know, paying someone that you know for consulting, but we don't know what that means.
Right. So, you know, or being the person that will go out and kind of like, you know, like take the shots from the media because they're, you know, hey, maybe we just need a dumb person we're going to send up there that's going to be, you know, put in place that they're going to field the phone calls and they're going to sound like whatever, but they're going to be the pass through that's going to allow for, you know, the funding to get where it needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of like administrative / bureaucracy / fundraising, that kind of thing that doesn't even actually go to directly to the cause, you know, that they're pushing for.
100%. Well, before we get into the most recent piece that you did, which kind of echoes some of the things we're talking about right now, there are some other takeaways from your piece from that one in that you wrote in December about one that kind of post-electoral kind of assessment of kind of what the influence was and directions where monies was starting to being funneled.
I think we cover most of the points, mostly just that they made overstated claims about how successful their attacks on school boards was, but we shouldn't kind of back away and think that they're not a threat because they're building infrastructure and resources and already doing real harm, even though they, you know, have only won in certain places, but where they've won, it's scary. So that's basically our takeaway there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and I think like, you know, I'm like going back to these, you know, the way that writing used to take, like novels used to be written in serial form, you know, like over periods of time. Like this is kind of what we get with your work in TruthOut, you know, because and because we start to see the kind of development here. And the most recent piece that you got, Tax Docs link right-wing parents group to Leonard Leo's Dark Money Network. This is, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but the kind of impetus here is that, okay, now we actually have some of the tax documents, what we can see where this money went for some of these organizations. And front and center of this is this organization called Parents Defending Education. Now, we've talked about them on the show before. I think they're ones that they don't get the same kind of traction in the media or attention, say like someone like Moms for Liberty who's showing up at school boards meetings yelling at people, and yet they seem to be really influential and important players to understand what's going on here. So talk us through this, you know, here you got these kind of new documents that come in, we're seeing this organization, what's the takeaways here that we should be digging into?
Yeah, so parents defending education, you're totally spot on that I think they don't get as much attention as Moms for Liberty, and I think that's by design. I think they try to build themselves as more moderate and oriented towards the legal system. So they do a lot of things like filing lawsuits and federal complaints against schools and school districts for supposedly racist, i.e., anti-white policies. Like, for example, if there's a mass shooting targeting Asian members of the community, and they have a group where they only want, they have like a meeting where they only are saying like, oh, Asian members of the community come and unite. They want to just like talk amongst themselves. PDE would find out, get a report about that, and sue them saying this is like racism because it's only Asian students that were invited to like talk about this tragedy in their community. So that kind of thing. And they've done that around the country. And they bill themselves, like all these other groups, as, of concerned parents groups. And they've been, portrayed that way in right-wing media a lot. But, they have, we've known for a long time, especially thanks to Maurice Cunningham, who studies dark money and education, that Nikki Neely has longstanding ties to the Koch network, the network of, billionaire oil mogul Charles Koch. So not a grassroots group. We found out from this 2021 990. So mind you, not even their 2022 990, where the November elections happened and they probably got even more funding, that they took in their first year, mind you, over $3 million, which is, and it's, this a nonprofit group. So like, what nonprofit takes in $3 million in its first year? Not many, I would say. So concerned parents, maybe, but also like very well connected. And none of this, like 1% or so was like from membership dues. So actual parents on the ground, like paying membership dues, 80,000 out of like the almost 3.2 million. And then it also showed that Nikki Neely, the executive director of PD, took in, how much was it? It was like 125 plus this huge bonus. That was 50% of her salary. So, she took in almost $200,000. And then the second in line, made $118,000. So they're taking in these like not paltry sums. Right. And so that's the first big finding, is like something we already knew, but this verified, is that this isn't just a ragtag group of concerned parents who are just issuing FOIA requests willy-nilly. They're experienced right-wing operatives who make a lot of money and spend a lot of money influencing the direction of our schools. And then the second thing that I thought was probably more groundbreaking was that this group it's not just Koch tied, it's really tied to this operative, Leonard Leo, who's this religious right guy who is co-chair of the Federalist Society, like this group that's almost single-handedly like turned the legal profession to the right and our judicial system to the right. That's been one of Leonard Leo's main aims, is to turn our judicial system to the right, and he largely has succeeded. And Roe was just like one of many instances or one piece of evidence that that's the case. And we'll be seeing a lot more of that in this next Supreme Court term. Yay!
Yay! Yeah, I mean, like, he was the guy, right? I mean, we've gone over this once before. Mm-hmm. Like, he was the guy who basically was like handed Trump that list of, here's your Supreme Court justices that you have to choose from. That was the Federal Society list that he helped fund, and and he's been at it for a long time. I mean, I think we talked about at one point where we're finally starting to, his name is finally starting to get into the mainstream news now because of his influence in the Trump administration. But by then, he's already had like 20 years or something like this of building and infiltrating, or not infiltrating, I shouldn't say, but building out that conservative right wing kind of judiciary. It's pretty stellar, and the numbers here were just kind of remarkable, just in terms of the kind of money that is being kind of mustered behind these projects.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, Leonard Leo, as you said, he handpicked the list of Supreme Court nominees from which Trump then picked 3, making our Supreme Court dominated by the far right. And he took no money from this. He temporarily backed down from his job at the Federalist Society to do this, and then now he's here once again. Yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah. We don't even know who was paying his salary or not then. So part of the evidence that we have that PD is tied to the Christian right and the religious right and Leonard Leo is the consulting groups, like we were talking about before, how these groups can, not just PACs, but also these 501c3 groups like PDE is, they have to list the groups that they paid for consulting in their 990 tax documents. So in this 2021 990 tax document, there's 3 groups. All of them have varying degrees of ties to Leonard Leo. So there's one called Active Engagement. This one is probably the most loose tie, but it was created by this guy named Richard Norman. He's member of the Council for National Policy. If anyone's heard of that group, it's a very secretive, far-right Christian nationalist group. And Leonard Leo, we're not sure because they're so secretive if he still sits on the board, but very recently he has sat on the board. So that's the first consulting group that it paid. Another one was a group called Convoy McCarthy. And PDE used Tyler Green, who's an attorney there, to file at least one complaint. And Green is one of 3 trustees on Marble Freedom Trust. And Marble Freedom Trust has been in the news because this was Leonard Leo's entity that he used to take, or he was given $1.6 billion from Bari Said, this billionaire. $1.6 billion. That's the largest political donation in history that we know of, to
right.
Leonard Leo through this Marble Freedom Trust. Yeah, sorry, what were you going to say, Kevin?
No, this is exactly it. This is the thing that I remember this, of course, when it came at the time, but seeing those numbers again, $1.6 billion. I mean, that's basically a license to do whatever the hell you want.
Just the interest on that will fund countless, every year will fund countless right-wing dark money groups. It's wild.
I was thinking about this last night. The Super Bowl is on, right? Super Bowl's on, of course. And I was thinking about, for that organization, renting Super Bowl ad time is like pocket change. That's the kind of money we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. I mean, so, if they were to run that kind of Jesus gets us all kind of ad that they ran during the Super Bowl last night, they could have done that. Somebody could say, hey, do you got to change that, reach in their couch and pull that out, and they could have run that ad for them. That's the kind of money we're talking here.
Yeah, it's an absurd, not unfathomable amount of money to me. Yeah. And then lastly, the last consulting group was Leo's consulting group, CRC.
Yes, do talk about this. I love this. It's we've got so much money now that we don't need to be nonprofits, right? It's that blew my mind. Yeah. Can we just, okay, sorry, I didn't mean to get it to throw us off, but this just blew my mind, just saying okay, enough of this nonprofit stuff. Time to kind of this is like the mob. Once it establishes and washes all its money, right, and then establishes a legitimate business, right, and then kind of moves on from there. I mean, that's what I was reminded of. I'm holy shit, this is the model of the mob. It's you do all this stuff behind the scenes, you have your kind of shell companies, you kind of manipulate everything behind the scenes, and then you establish that thing so that you can pass on to your children, right, and then it's all washed and clean. Blew my mind.
Yeah, we don't know how much even or where he's getting money from. I mean, CRC Advisors, I'm sure I would guess that he takes money there. But he, after the Kavanaugh nomination, I think he bought a mansion in Maine, and we don't know where that money comes from, for example. And because he was an unpaid consultant for Trump, he didn't have to disclose it.
Beautiful. And now this is just because I ran over you on this one. So, but it's this is the CRC Advisors. That's the name of the for-profit group, right? That the consulting firm that he's got.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it used to go by something else. But now, after the success with all the Supreme Court justices, he kind of like co-founded this group. This group existed before, but they kind of remade it. And CRC Advisors, one of the big things it does is it advises big donors on who to fund. So it's likely the case that for many of these groups that list CRC Advisors as a consulting group, that they are paid to like find match donors with these dark money groups. So that could be what he was doing there for PDE, is matching like Fafari donors to them. So that's...
Yeah. And I imagine that as a private kind of for-profit company too, as well, of course, they're not kind of bound by the same kind of regulations and disclosures than they would be if they were a nonprofit, right?
Yeah, they don't have to file tax documents as far as I know. I mean, they're listed on the 990s for the groups that they consult, but I don't think they have to themselves file anything.
Wow. Man, that's good work if you can get it, I'll tell you. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I have these notes as I was going through these articles, and again, one of the things that I love about the work that you do and you do at True North is you start to look at, say, the how do I put this, the kind of the multifaceted approach that some of these groups are taking. So it's not just one group doing this one thing. And, one of the things I thought was so important, this is what I want everybody else out who's listening to hear this too as well, about the focus on parents defending education in the beginning, is because you make this, again, you're talking to Morris Cunningham. So and by the way, everybody, if you're want to have more from Morris Cunningham, that is going to be the next show on the Beacon, the Bucks County Beacon's The Signal, and that will be released on Wednesday. So you get to hear us. We did a fantastic interview with Morris Cunningham on exactly this stuff. And it's kind of like great. You see, like, his work cited here. He was citing True North research. It's just super. It was wonderful. But one of the things that you kind of talk about here is that one of the things that parents defending education do, and you mentioned this at the beginning, is they tend to file lawsuits, right? And the game there is very much as, if you can file lawsuits and cost the schools money. All I could think of is going back to Naomi Klein's The Shock Doctrine, right? The idea is that you kind of force an economic crisis, if you will, on the school districts who've been already victims of 40 years of defunding, kind of under, the neoliberal kind of logic of defunding the public. And now you have this organization with all sorts of money to spend that they don't even need to have, they don't need to care if they win or not. They can just go in and file these lawsuits and cost tons of money to these school districts. And it advances their agenda, right? Because then the schools are kind of less capable in order to fight back, and it goes on and on. In addition to having, you have these Moms for Liberty groups that are, like I was saying before, like these shock troops that are showing up with all their kind of cultural warfare stuff. You've got this legal arm that is attacking really the financial infrastructure of the school districts. And it's all geared toward, as you say in these pieces, a long-term agenda towards defunding public education, right? Or at the very least, defunding the part of, or let's say, reapportioning or redistributing the money that goes into public education to private entities. So can you talk a little bit about that as how you see that kind of agenda and this work? Because I think I look at it as we're moving forward, and I am always haunted by one of the things that Paul Martino said at a school board meeting last year when he was during the Central Bucks fights that were happening here, is that he called out two members of the board who were Democrats that got supported by the teachers union. He called them out and basically said that they should recuse themselves from the board in upcoming teachers' contract negotiations because they received money from the teachers union. How freaking whatever. It's hypocrisy and shame does not matter here, obviously, to these people. But what that said to me, that was a signal to me, is okay, they've got the eyes on the prize, right? They're going after teachers' power, and they're going after, just like they did in Wisconsin with public sector unions, right? Yeah. In 2010, going after these kind of infrastructure from these multiple angles. One, the curriculum. Two, grooming our kids, going after teachers, both in terms of what they're quote unquote doing to our kids, but also their infrastructure. So can you talk about, put that in that picture, like you see this feeding into, because all of these characters, right? That's what their hobby horse is.
Yes, absolutely. I would just say there, we've talked about this before, but there are groups that have existed for a long time, especially within the Koch network, that have been targeting public schools and want to entirely, do away with public schools. They want to abolish public schools. And a lot of these groups now are not shy to even say, we want to abolish the Department of Ed, like Betsy DeVos said at the Moms for Liberty conference this summer. So there are longstanding groups, but then it was shock doctrine, actually, that in 2020, like the pandemic caused all these groups to start attacking public schools and teachers unions, and COVID, mitigation measures, masking and that kind of thing. But COVID was just an excuse to kind of target schools and try to defund them, essentially. And, we had all these groups pop up too after the quote, critical race theory scare that is manufactured by another dark money agent, Christopher Rufo. You have all these groups popping up tied to Charles Koch, Betsy DeVos, now the Christian right too, because the Christian right doesn't like public education any more than like the far right libertarians that want to do away with public education. So really, these attacks on the critical race theory, the pushing, oftentimes they have a twofold strategy, right? They want to attack the public schools from within and from without. So, and they're not shy about this. Independent Women's Forum staffers have said this, that they want to do whatever they can to like make public schools fit like right-wing ideology and like basically indoctrinate students with right-wing ideology at the same time as they're like pushing to defund with school choice bills and this kind of thing. So, and we're seeing unprecedented levels of school choice bills across the country in the state at the state level. So, these groups are, all these groups have sort of the same goal, and it's to undermine public education. And part of that is attacking teachers unions. It's, attacking curricula. It's attacking the amount of money that schools get. It's really all part of the strategy.
Well, there you have it. So we've got our work cut out for us, I guess. Well, we all do indeed. And I could go on and on, and I won't at this point, because we're going to be back here probably in no time flat, talking about the next chapter and what goes on here. So before I let you go tonight, Alyssa, are there, two things, I guess. The first thing are, people listening to this, hearing about some of these new reports and stuff, is there something you want to leave them with, right? Number two. And then number two is, where can they go to find out more information? We'll have some links in the show notes, but things that you think that would be good resources for them to check out, to kind of learn more about this and maybe get connected to the resources they need.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't want to leave everyone in despair. Like I said, I think that these groups were more trying to sell the success of their attacks on schools for the midterm elections to their donors and to the public, but they weren't really successful. And people, polls show still that that parents really trust their public school teachers. There's a lot of people pushing back. Increasingly, I see people just are reaching out to me, like who have been facing these right-wing attacks, just asking for materials or if I can help find any of the disclosure documents for the school boards or that kind of thing. And like, we're always happy to help as much as we can. The other thing I would say, just like if you want to follow groups tracking dark money, do that. We're True North Research. You can find us on Twitter at It's True North, on our website, truenorthresearch.org. You can follow me on Twitter at Alyssa Bowen. There's other awesome groups doing a lot of important work. Documented, Center for Media and Democracy. There's Heal Together is really amazing. They do a lot with attacks on like Black experiences and civil rights curriculum. there's Judd Legum's Popular Info Substack. There's really a lot of resources that you could find. Maurice Cunningham also just came out with a really great guide to some of these dark money groups, and it includes not just like excuse me, the right-wing dark money groups, but also sort of neoliberal groups that are funded by like liberal school privatizers as well. So that's a really good resource. Yeah, and get involved. Like, don't be scared to go to the school board meetings, because they're not.
100%. And I think that, we're seeing that more and more. I have to say, it's like, I learned so much from the folks that are able to go to every single board, like school board meeting. There's a growing and fantastic network of people reporting back, right, and making those school board meetings public. I know in the Palisades School District, not too far from here, for example, Amy Connect has been on talking about this. They pushed this initiative to make sure that all the school board meetings were going to be live streamed, right, because they weren't up until that point. So making sure that everyone had access to this stuff and the video was going to be available. Little things like that, where you're kind of making small steps together as a community, I think have just been doing tremendous work. And I know of just seeing the movements that are happening around me, just around our school district, have been impressive to see the work they've been able to do. And I think that is the work, right? I mean,
totally. And amplifying that too is something,
100%. And just like Alyssa said too, as well, not to leave everybody in despair, is that, one of the reasons why I want to have Alyssa on to talk about this stuff, why we have a focus on some of the dark money and stuff, is not to basically make things seem insurmountable, but is to recognize the strategies and tactics when they appear. Because I know that I can't tell you how many times I've heard from people is like, well, we showed up at this meeting and there were these people talking like, things I have never heard people say these things before. I don't know what they're talking about. And it appears, a lot of folks we confronted for the first time, and it seems like it's just random and local. But to realize that, no, we can recognize this discourse, the language at which it's come from, and there's a playbook. And the better we can recognize the playbook, I think the better we're positioned to kind of be on the offense and not on the defense. So I appreciate that. And
you could plug your PAC too. Like if you have that capacity to start a local PAC, just like Kevin did, I would say go for it.
100%. Like, again, that was the whole idea. Look, and here's the kind of thing too, is like we have these mechanisms and these levers that are there, right? That we need to utilize too as well. As when when Level Field first kind of got in touch with me and was kind of looking for this, I was like, like anybody on the progressive side, you get very skeptical about anybody who's contacting you about stuff like this. But the more we talked, the more we kind of looked into this stuff and thinking about, how might we, really help channel small dollar donations. But, that doesn't mean we need to reproduce their playbook, right? It means that we invest in the things that are going to help build our community. Right. And that organizing. And this is the year, we've slowly started to build that up for this year, right? This is the school board election year, right? Not to sink the money into the, to the, Democratic candidate that's, going for Congress, but rather to like invest it in what's happening with the, local organizing and school board. So 100%. Yeah. Alyssa, thank you so much for taking the time out tonight. I always love having you on. I always appreciate what you're kind of, bringing to this fight. And, everything that is happening over at True North too is just such a gift, I think, to all of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's always such fun. And thanks for the question, Ross.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So thank you for everybody who's tuning in live tonight. Thank you, everybody who's taking this as a podcast. I want to remind you that you can help support this show by heading over to Podbean. What am I talking about? Patreon.com/RCPress, where you can become a patron for as little as $5 a month. And just like Alyssa said, like if you want to kind of make sure that these oligarchs don't control our future, you can kind of help put those small dollar donations to work by heading over to ragingchicken.levelfield.net, where we have our community-rooted PAC that's going to invest in organizing and beating back against these toxic organizations that are injecting our communities with right-wing extremism. So Alyssa, I'm sure I'm going to be talking to you in the near future. Can't wait to hear what you've got next in store, and we'll keep an eye out for you. Thank you so much. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, everybody, this is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. We're out of here, and we'll see you this Friday for Friday Politics Roundup. We got a couple irons in the fire for next week. I'll let you know as soon as I can about who we're going to have on the show in the next few weeks. Got some good ones coming up. Talk to you soon. See ya!
guess I'll fly away now.